Workspaces in Dreamweaver CS4 allow you to control the appearance of toolbars, panels, and inspectors as they are used in your own personal workflow. You could think of workspaces as your way of creating your own custom version of Dreamweaver. When using workspaces, you can either use one of the efficient preset workspaces, or you could just build your own. Using workspaces can dramatically reduce the time spent rearranging panels and opening and closing panels for various tasks. You can simply switch from one workspace to another for an entirely different panel or screen layout. First, let's take a look at the views we have when we're dealing with our pages. Now, I can switch to code view so that I see just the code that's creating my page, a design view, which shows me a rendered version of it, or I can split it between the code and design views. Now, there's some modifications to this in Dreamweaver CS4 that we can do. For example, I can go to view and I can split them vertically so that I'm seeing the code and the design view split vertically, which for my money is a little bit easier to read. I like that view a lot, and I use this one as my default. I can also change it so that the design view shows up on the left and the code on the right, or by going back up to the menu, I can switch it back again, which is really nice. Now, there's another split view that I like, and this is the split code view. Because of the fact that we can view related files now in the same window, we can have our source code on the left-hand side, for example, and then on the right-hand side, we might be looking at our external style sheet or some external JavaScript file or something like that. So for people who are really big into coding, this is a really nice little feature. One of the other things that we can do is save a little bit of screen real estate by changing how our panels behave. One of the things that I can do is over in my panel dock on the right-hand side, I could choose a specific panel that I'm going to use a lot, like the CSS styles panel here, for example, grab it by its tab, drag it, and sort of float it so that it's a floating panel, just like we get in most other Adobe applications. Now, there's a little bit of change here between the Mac and the PC interfaces. The Mac has a dock just like you do on the PC, but the dock itself is sort of a stacked panel grouping that can float, whereas on the PC, the dock is sort of locked into place. One of the things we can do on both versions, however, is we can minimize these down to icons. So one of the things I can do is I can collapse this to icons. And as soon as I do that, I can see that here I have just icons representing the panels now, as well as some labels. To further save space, I can go to the dividing line between those two, move that to the right, and move that down to where those guys are just simply icons and nothing else. Now, if I'm trying to save even more space, I can hit F4. That's going to hide all of my panels, as well as the properties inspector. You may notice, though, that it's left a little bit of a gray bar where those used to be. If I hover over that gray bar, those panels sort of expand, and I can access them the way I would anytime. And if I hover over them, they collapse again. The same is true for the properties inspector. So that could become part of a workspace if you needed a really maximized view. Hitting F4 will just go ahead and bring those guys back. So as you can see, pretty easy to modify the interface, and often you'll want to quickly return to the interface layout you started with or switch to another layout. To do that, we'll explore using the preset workspaces. Dreamweaver comes with 8 preset workspaces that are designed around specific tasks. You can easily access and manage your workspaces from the workspace switcher found in the application bar. So I'm going to go up to the application bar, click on the workspace switcher, and I can see all of my preset workspaces. Now, just to go through a couple of these, this is the app developer, and of course, it's set up for people who are doing more application development. We also have the coder view. So if you're a person who really likes to hand code, coder view is nice because I can switch back and forth between code on all my related files. And then I have my files, my assets, my snippets over on the left-hand side. We also have Classic, and one of the things I like about the Classic is that the insert toolbar goes from being a docked panel to back to its default position in Dreamweaver CS3. I kind of like having it above the document, but if you want to save a little bit of screen real estate, you can use it as its default use in Dreamweaver, which is to have it as a floating panel. All right, now you'll notice if I switch back to Designer that is not the Designer workspace as it comes right out of the box. The reason for that is that if you make any change to that default workspace, Dreamweaver remembers that change. And when you go back to that workspace, it gives you that instead of the basic workspace settings. Well, at any time you can get those back. I can go right back up to my workspace switcher and I can choose to reset Designer. That's going to take it back to its factory default settings, and I'm free to begin customizing it again. So for example, if you do a lot of testing and site reports, there's not really a preset workspace designed around that. So you're better off creating one of those. And that's true of any workflow that you might be doing. So as a starting point, I'll just start from Designer. I'm going to switch over to Code View so I see nothing but code. And another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to close a couple of panels. I don't really need the insert panel while I'm doing this. So I'm going to undock it and close it. I also probably won't be using the properties inspector a lot, but maybe I don't want to close it. Well, I can go up to Window and deselect Properties. It doesn't close it. it just sort of minimizes it. And going back and clicking on the tab or double clicking on the tab is going to bring that back. So double clicking on tabs will collapse or expand panels vertically as well. So in addition to these, whenever you're doing testing, you're probably going to want the results panel open. So I'm going to go up to Window and I'm going to choose Results, and I'm just going to choose Validation. Maybe I'm interested in first doing some validation. And when I do that, it opens up the entire results panel. Maybe you don't want the entire results panel. You just want a subset of it. Well, you're free to undock any of these. So I could go to Search, for example, undock that and close it and do the same thing maybe for reference. Now, what that shows you is the level of customization possible. You can go ahead and change any of the default groupings to suit your own needs. I'm further going to customize this by grabbing the divider between the document and the panels and move that up a little bit so I've got more room to read my results when I start doing testing. All right, so now this is going to be my custom workspace. Obviously, a designer right now would remember this as the designer workspace, and it's certainly not a designer workspace. So I'm going to grab the pull-down menu, and I'm going to choose New Workspace, and I'm just going to call this workspace Testing. There we go. So now I can switch back to Designer and switch to Coder, and anytime I need to do testing, I can switch to my custom testing workspace. Notice that the custom workspaces show up at the very top of the workspace switcher. As soon as I do that, I go right back to testing. So utilizing workspaces properly will save you a surprising amount of time when working in Dreamweaver. Take some time and examine how you work within Dreamweaver and which panels you frequently find yourself opening and closing. Basing custom workspaces around these tendencies and then integrating them with Dreamweaver's pre-built workspaces will go a long way to making you more efficient within the application.